So I want you to picture a room where the curtains have been drawn shut for years.
Just completely dark.
Completely dark, yeah. The air is entirely still. And in the center of this room sits a person. They're completely isolated from the outside world, and they're just biting down hard on a pair of wooden chopsticks.
And they aren't eating, right?
No, not at all. The wood is held horizontally between their teeth, pushed back far enough to engage the jaw muscles, creating this really sharp tension.
Yeah.
And they just holding it there.
Wow.
Yeah. And not just for a few minutes as some bizarre experiment. This is a rigid daily discipline spanning decades.
Decades. I mean, it's such a haunting, intensely private image to start with.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we're bringing you into this specific room today because the source material we're looking at revolves around this exact practice. It's this autobiographical essay written by a Japanese Hikikomori.
Right. Which, for anyone who might not know the exact term, a hikikomori is an individual experiencing severe, protracted social withdrawal, like extreme isolation.
Exactly. And the author of this text has lived in profound isolation, largely hidden from society for most of their life.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are going to unpack the profound psychology behind this chopstick training.
Because it's not just a weird quirk, is it?
No, not at all. It's a desperate, highly calculated survival mechanism. We really want to explore the invisible, frankly exhausting labor of social isolation,
Right.
and also the paradox of fearing the very human connection you're craving. Plus, this breathtaking resilience of preparing your entire life for a 0.001% chance at a normal life.
That statistic is just wild to me. We'll definitely get into that. But before we do, I think we need to set the tone for this deep dive.
Yeah, definitely. Because you hear the premise, decades of severe isolation,
Ah.
and you immediately expect this narrative of just unrelenting despair.
Right, you expect it to be super heavy and tragic. But the author's documentation of their life is startlingly analytical.
It really is. It's completely devoid of self-pity.
It reads more like a field manual written by an anthropologist who's studying their own ruined nervous system.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's clinical, it's deeply self-aware, and honestly, it's sprinkled with this very unique kind of dry humor.
It is. It's surprisingly hopeful in places. So to really understand the function of the chopsticks, I think we need to go back to the beginning, right? Like why the dysfunction started.
Exactly. We have to isolate the origin. The text traces the necessity of this physical training all the way back to the author's childhood home.
Right, specifically focusing on this realization they had that they'd adopted a permanent, quote-unquote, scary face.
The scary face, yes.
They state really plainly that in their family dynamic, cheerfulness was just taboo.
And that phrase cheerfulness is taboo. I mean, that provides a diagnostic lens for everything that follows in the text.
Unpack that a bit. What does that mean from a psychological standpoint?
Well, in developmental psychology, we look at the family unit as the initial testing ground for emotional regulation, right?
Yep, where you learn how to feel.
Exactly. A child maps their autonomic nervous system onto the baseline state of their caregivers.
Oh, interesting.
So if the caregivers project a baseline of hostility or gloom or emotional volatility,
The child absorbed that.
they do more than absorb it. The child quickly learns that expressing joy or levity isn't just inappropriate, it's actively dangerous.
Because it draws attention to them.
Right. It provokes retaliation. It breaks the rules of the house.
Okay, so let's really look at this. It sounds like psychological camouflage to me.
Camouflage is a great word for it.
Like a chameleon changing its colors to avoid predators, except the color is gloom and the predator is their own family dynamic.
That is exactly what's happening. The author realized their survival depended on mirroring that ambient gloom.
And what's wild is how the text conceptualizes this. Not just as an emotional adaptation, but as a strictly physical one.
Right, the actual musculature of the face.
Yes. They manipulated their facial muscles to present a flat, intimidating, or gloomy effect just to avoid triggering their parents.
And that brings up one of the most profound observations in the entire essay. The author writes, if your face is gloomy, your feelings become gloomy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that moves way beyond simple behavioral conditioning, right?
It does. It moves straight into the mechanics of somatic psychology. It's the facial feedback hypothesis playing out over a lifetime.
Wait, explain the facial feedback hypothesis for us.
Sure. So proprioception, which is the brain's awareness of the body's position and movement, is a two-way street.
Okay.
The brain doesn't just say, I feel sad, therefore I will frown. It also reads the physical state of the body to confirm its emotional reality.
So if you're frowning, your brain's like, oh, I guess we're sad.
Exactly. If you constantly contort your face into a scowl, just to survive your living room, you are chronically signaling your vagus nerve and your amygdala that you are in a state of threat.
Man. So the brain is just receiving this mechanical data-furrowed brow, clenched jaw, and it synthesizes a corresponding emotional state of dread.
Yes. The author forced a physical mask of gloom as camouflage, but the neurological feedback loop eventually hardened that mask into a permanent psychological reality.
That is so tragic. Think about the sheer energy, the caloric expenditure required to maintain that suppression.
It must be astronomical.
Because human beings, especially kids, have a biological imperative to engage socially. We are hardwired to seek reciprocal facial expressions. We smile to get care.
Right, it's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
And the author had to actively short-circuit that fundamental drive. They literally had to turn their face into a fortress.
A fortress that eventually trapped them. Because, as the essay outlines, once that fortress is constructed, you can't just dismantle it when you leave the house.
The threat is gone, but the walls are still up.
Exactly. The childhood home dictates the neural pathways, and then those pathways dictate how this person perceives the entirety of the outside world.
Which brings us to how they interact with society. The text moves from the enclosed gloom of the house to the chaotic expanse of the public sphere.
And their specific type of agoraphobia is really highly irregular.
Yeah, they talk about being absolutely terrified of existing in public. They feared that even a microscopic, undetectable smile would invite an attack.
They felt like a permanent target.
Exactly. But the most striking revelation here isn't just their fear of, like, malicious people. It's their absolute paralysis around good people.
Yes. The good people paradox.
The author writes about feeling literally suffocated by individuals who project cheerful, friendly energy.
Which seems completely backward to how we normally think about anxiety.
Yeah, totally. Like, you'd think friendly people would be a relief. But when someone attempted warmth, the author felt bound. Their cognitive processes just froze.
They were overwhelmed by an immediate dread about future obligations or interactions.
Right. And the text has this haunting quote to explain it. The author says, "My soul had fallen to the dark side, so I couldn't breathe in the frequency of good people."
Couldn't breathe in the frequency.
Yeah.
That is just a stunning articulation of trauma-induced sensory processing issues.
It really is beautifully put, even though it's so dwarfed.
It perfectly describes allostatic load, which is the wear and tear on the body from chronic stress.
Right.
This author's allostatic load is maxed out just by existing. So when they encounter a good person, they aren't encountering a friend, they are encountering an unpredictable variable that violates all their internal prediction models.
I really look at this through the framework of predictive processing. Like, the brain operates as a prediction machine.
That constantly generating hypotheses about the environment.
Exactly, just trying to minimize surprise. And the author's foundational prediction model, which they built in that dark house, tells them the world is hostile.
And gloomy.
Yeah, and that sudden shifts in emotion signify extreme danger. So a cheerful person introduces this massive prediction error.
Right, the nervous system just can't parse the frequency of kindness because it has no neurological template for it.
Because kindness requires a reciprocal transaction. You have to smile back, you have to relax your posture, maybe engage in some future planning, like let's grab coffee.
And the author just lacks the physiological vocabulary to execute that transaction.
It's the demand for reciprocity that triggers the suffocation.
Absolutely. Think about it. If someone is hostile, the author knows the script. Retreat. Display the scary face. Survive.
Right, they've been rehearsing that their whole life.
But if someone is kind, the script is entirely unknown. The ambiguity of a positive social interaction requires high-level executive function to navigate.
You have to assess their intent, formulate a response, calibrate your facial expressions.
Exactly. And for a nervous system perpetually locked in a threat response, that executive function is simply offline. The frequency of good people demands a performance of normalcy the author cannot afford to produce.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. The author has incredible metacognition about all of this.
Their self-awareness is off the charts.
They aren't under the delusion that society is actually a cartoon villain out to get them. They provide this stark statistical analysis of their own life.
Yeah, the percentages they give.
Right. They note that 99.99% of the time they were in public, absolutely nothing happened.
No one attacked them.
No one forced suffocating kindness on them. They only had a statistically insignificant handful of verbal altercations over decades.
Decades.
Right. They have the intellectual clarity to recognize that their environment is objectively safe, but they are still entirely paralyzed by this 0.001% perceived threat.
It is the perfect illustration of the hierarchy of the central nervous system.
Explain what you mean by that.
So cortical awareness, the logical realization that 99.99% of your trips outside are safe, is functionally useless when your subcortical structures are running a primal survival script.
Your logic brain can't override your lizard brain.
Exactly. The threat detection system operates on this asymmetrical risk profile. It calculates that missing a threat is fatal, but misidentifying a safe situation as a threat, that just costs energy.
So it flags everything as a 100% immediate danger just to be safe.
Right. The intellect is essentially a hostage forced to watch the body overreact to a statistical phantom.
A statistical phantom. That's a great way to put it. And this complete disconnect between objective reality and their subjective terror leads to the most surprising part of the text for me.
Because usually, facing a reality where society is that neurologically inaccessible, the standard trajectory is just a slow descent into total atrophy. Right?
Yeah, you just give up. You retreat completely. But the author introduces this mechanism of aggressive, almost absurd defiance.
The chopstick train.
The chopstick training. This is where we get back to that room we pictured at the start.
The transition from passive endurance to active physical intervention. It's the fulcrum of the whole essay.
And the specific mechanics of this intervention are just wild. They recognize that somatic feedback loop we talked about, that the gloomy face dictates the gloomy mind.
So they decide to mechanically force a disruption.
By biting the chopsticks for hours on end, specifically to force the orbicularis oris and the zygomaticus major muscles to lift the corners of the mouth.
They are using external torque to prevent their face from defaulting to its trauma-induced resting state.
It's unbelievable. And they quantify this effort over years. They report a successful, permanent elevation of their resting mouth corners by exactly 1 millimeter.
1 millimeter. 1 single millimeter of anatomical manipulation serving as a bulwark against total psychological collapse.
It's incredible. They're basically hacking their own vagal tone.
Exactly. By forcing the musculature of a smile, even artificially, they're sending efferent signals back to the brain suggesting safety.
It's a grueling brute force method of neuroplasticity.
But, the physical act itself, as intense as it is almost secondary to the philosophical framework behind it.
Oh, totally. The fantasies driving this regimen are where you really see their mindset. They weren't just biting chopsticks. They were practicing walking, rehearsing greetings in an empty room, refining their grooming habits.
Perfecting their table manner.
Yes. And what was the stated goal for all of this? Preparation for a quote-unquote 0.0001% chance that an opportunity for a normal life might materialize.
The 0.001% doctrine.
They explicitly visualize getting a girlfriend, planning an Italian dinner date just to, as they say, give her a happy time.
And mastering eating manners so impeccably that they could seamlessly attend a royal banquet.
A royal banquet. I mean, think about the monumental hope required to do this. It's like an astronaut going through grueling daily zero-gravity training in their garage for 20 years, just on the off chance NASA knocks on their door tomorrow.
That's a brilliant analogy, and the royal banquet fantasy in particular is really revealing.
How so?
It highlights this massive overcompensation mechanism. When you are positioned at the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy, completely isolated, functionally paralyzed, the mental model required to justify decades of painful preparation can't just be average integration.
Right, I want to be able to go to the grocery store isn't enough motivation for that level of pain.
Exactly. The psychological target has to be wildly outsized. Preparing for a royal banquet provides the necessary gravitational pull to keep them committed to the daily torture of the chopsticks.
It's a radical reimagining of time horizons. Like, modern social behavior is so heavily predicated on immediate feedback loops, right?
We exert effort, we expect an immediate reward.
Right. But the author is operating on a geological timescale of hope. They're dedicating decades of physical and mental labor toward an event that they themselves acknowledge has a 0.001% probability of ever occurring.
It's an extraordinary manifestation of agency. They can't control their panic attacks, they can't control their family history, but they can control the tension in their jaw.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Agency. And the text gives this incredible example of how they optimize that agency even when they were forced to be out in public.
Oh, the secret dojo.
Yes. Because for someone with social phobia, waiting in a public space, like at a bus stop or whatever, is usually a state of passive terror. You're trapped, exposed, vulnerable.
But the author weaponized that time.
They really did. Instead of just looking at a smartphone or dissociating, they engaged in covert physical training. They detail how they would perform internal tongue exercises behind closed lips to build muscle tone.
And the acupressure.
Right. They would adopt a posture, pretending to rest their chin thoughtfully in their hands, that actually allowed them to manipulate specific facial acupressure points to improve circulation.
They transformed a state of public exposure into a hidden dojo. It's a monumental cognitive shift.
By engaging in secret training, they completely alter their relationship with the environment. They're no longer just a victim enduring the gaze of society.
They're an infiltrator.
Yeah.
They're utilizing the hostile environment to sharpen their own tools.
It totally recontextualizes the anxiety, the elevated heart rate, the hypervigilance. It gets subtly hijacked and repurposed as the energy needed to perform their secret exercises.
And this proactivity extended even beyond the physical conditioning. They also engaged in what they called social studies.
The field tricks.
Yes. They would actively observe the mechanics of human interaction, positioning themselves near retail spaces to watch employees handing out samples.
Or watching construction sites.
Right, specifically trying to map the atmospheric dynamics of a working environment. They treated societal participation like this complex alien system that could be reverse engineered through rigorous observation.
Which sets up one of the most fascinating contradictions in this whole deep dive. We've established their severe isolation, right? Their terror of the complex flow of society.
But then the text presents a piece of empirical evidence that just shatters our assumptions about them.
The yakiniku restaurant story.
The yakiniku story, yes.
So surprisingly, the author recounts attending their parents' anniversary dinner at a Korean BBQ restaurant. And far from being this mute, paralyzed participant, the author actually initiates this remarkably fluid, empathetic exchange with the server.
Which is astounding given everything we've discussed.
Right. They're casually joking with the staff member, noting that it must be excruciating to smell grilling meat while hungry on a shift. And they even empathize with the physical labor of cleaning the heavy exhaust fans suspended over the tables.
That is not basic scripted pleasantry. That is high-level cognitive empathy.
Exactly. It's an acute awareness of another person's subjective experience.
It proves that the core machinery of social connection theory of mind, empathy, contextual humor is completely intact.
The chopstick training, the observations, the rehearsals, they actually worked.
They did. The author is highly capable of sophisticated interpersonal connection. But this revelation forces us to confront a massive structural problem.
Right. If they possess this level of social acuity, why does the prospect of actually holding a job remain entirely impossible for them?
And the author's own diagnostic breakdown of this failure is incredibly precise.
They separate their capability in a one-on-one, bounded interaction from their total collapse in a systemic environment.
They attribute their inability to work to two very specific factors: a developmental disorder memory glitch that causes panic, and in adult children, social phobia.
Okay, let's translate those terms into operational psychology. What does the developmental disorder memory glitch actually mean?
So that refers to a failure in working memory under acute stress. Working memory is that cognitive buffer that allows us to hold multiple pieces of information simultaneously.
Like remembering a customer's order while calculating their change and listening to your manager give instructions.
Exactly. In an individual with severe trauma or chronic hyperarousal, the threshold for cognitive overload is incredibly low. The stress hormone cortisol essentially floods the prefrontal cortex, and it just crashes the working memory system.
Ah, okay. So the yakiniku interaction worked because it was a closed loop.
Precisely.
The parameters were fixed.
Yeah.
I am the customer, you are the server. We are discussing the immediate environment, the exhaust fans. The cognitive load is totally manageable.
But a workplace is an open system. It's full of overlapping, unpredictable variables.
And that's where the second part comes in, the adult children component.
Right, which explains the terror of those unpredictable variables. The term adult children typically refers to individuals who grew up in dysfunctional homes and failed to internalize the invisible scripts of healthy social navigation.
Because in their home, the only script was gloom.
Exactly. They never learned how to negotiate boundaries. They never learned how to handle mild conflict without catastrophizing, or how to read the subtle political dynamics of a group.
And a workplace demands constant, low-level navigation of exactly those complex dynamics.
Yes. For the author, the sheer volume of ambient social data in a workplace causes an immediate buffer overflow, resulting in a panic attack.
And to really cleave this home, The text distills this exact paralyzing dynamic into a singular, devastating metaphor.
The master metaphor of the piece.
The author describes the attempt to integrate into society, to hold a job and participate in the complex flow by writing. It's like walking a tightrope on a skyscraper while pressing the accelerator and the brake at the same time.
It is a phenomenal articulation of systemic deadlock. The imagery operates on so many levels.
Let's unpack it. The tightrope on a skyscraper establishes the stakes of the environment, right?
Right. In a standard social framework, making a mistake at work, say a social faux pas or a missed deadline, is just a minor stumble on solid ground. You adjust, you apologize, you move on.
But for the author, lacking any foundational social safety net and operating with this hypersensitized threat detection system, every interaction is conducted over an abyss.
There is zero margin for error.
A single misstep isn't processed as an embarrassment. It's processed as a total existential failure. You fall off the skyscraper.
And then, onto that high-wire framework, they layer the mechanical impossibility of the accelerator and the brake.
That's the part that really got me. It captures the tragedy of their ambition perfectly.
What does the accelerator represent to you here?
It's the immense driving force of their desire to live. It's the energy behind the decades of chopstick training, the longing for the Italian date, the desperate wish to be a functioning member of society. They are flooring the accelerator, generating massive internal momentum.
But the brake is engaged with equal terrifying force.
Right. And the brake is the accumulated trauma of the dark house. It's the fear of their own scary face alienating people.
It's the memory of past rejections.
Yes. The brake is the learned defense mechanism screaming at them. Any movement forward guarantees catastrophic pain.
So you have an engine revving at maximum capacity, generating enormous heat and friction, while the vehicle remains entirely stationary.
The internal components, their psychological and physical reserves, are essentially being incinerated by these contradictory forces.
Which perfectly explains why the author ultimately concludes that participating in the complex flow of society is impossible. It's not a failure of will, it's a mathematical reality of energy consumption.
The internal friction burns through their available cognitive resources before they even step out the door.
Exactly.
But this realization of total systemic deadlock makes the existence of the text itself kind of an anomaly, doesn't it?
It does.
Because if the physical world is a tightrope and the internal engine is burning itself out, where does the momentum of the chopstick training actually go?
Okay.
It had to find a vector somewhere.
The author couldn't physically attend the royal banquet, but the decades of preparation demanded a release.
And that release materialized digitally in the publication of the very essay we're deep diving into.
The transition from physical isolation to digital expression is the culmination of their entire methodology.
But even that wasn't easy. The text reveals this grueling timeline. It took the author 5 years of agonizing hesitation just to initiate the blog and publish this account.
5 years of hovering over the void.
5 years, just to press publish. But when they finally executed the action, they highlight a specific, highly intentional tactical choice.
The tone they used.
Yes. They state that they wrote the piece utilizing a mellow tone. They used the Japanese term maramaro, which suggests a soft, rounded, non-threatening aesthetic.
And they claim that adopting the specific gentle persona is what finally allowed them to bypass their anxiety and articulate their deepest vulnerabilities.
I feel like this is a masterclass in psychological compartmentalization. They created a safe harbor.
We really have to view this mellow tone as the direct digital descendant of the wooden chopstick.
Oh, I love that connection. Because the chopstick forced a 1 millimeter physical shift to hack the nervous system into feeling safe enough to exist.
Right.
And the maramaro tone forces a digital shift to hack the psychological defenses into feeling safe enough to speak.
Precisely. Think about it in the physical world. Their unedited presentation, the scary face, was a source of trauma and rejection. They couldn't present their raw self to society.
So by intentionally constructing this rounded, gentle, mellow narrative voice, they created an avatar.
And that avatar acted as a buffer. It allowed them to handle highly toxic radioactive material, their trauma, their fears, their intense isolation, without it contaminating their immediate sense of safety.
The tone was the containment suit. That is so well said.
And it also leverages the asymmetrical nature of digital communication.
What do you mean by asymmetrical?
Well, the terror of the frequency of good people in physical space is the demand for immediate real-time reciprocity. If someone smiles at you, you must smile back immediately or the interaction fails.
Right, the tightrope.
But a blog post removes that temporal pressure. The author can broadcast their vulnerability into the void, perfectly encased in their mellow tone, and they do not have to immediately process the reaction of the audience.
The tightrope is removed. They can express the desire of the accelerator without engaging the brake of immediate social terror.
Exactly. And in doing so, they explicitly validate the decades of unseen labor. The physical act of holding a smile, raising the corners of the mouth by 1 millimeter. It established the foundational neural pathways that eventually supported the psychological weight of this essay.
The body prepared the ground for the mind to finally speak.
It's beautiful, really.
And the author distills this entire brutal, beautiful architecture into a single closing sentiment in the text. They write, "Even as a shut-in, I didn't stop practicing smiling."
It is a quiet, devastating assertion of humanity.
It really is. Despite existing in an environment totally hostile to joy, despite the paralyzing mechanics of their own nervous system, they unilaterally refused to let the physical capacity for a smile atrophy.
It completely forces us to reevaluate our definitions of resilience and ambition. This isn't a story of someone who was broken by the world and just gave up.
No, not at all.
It's a story of someone who, recognizing they were incompatible with the complex flow of society, quietly built an entirely internal infrastructure of hope. They maintained the machinery of joy with zero evidence that they would ever get to use it.
This journey really challenges our fundamental assumptions about isolation and effort. We track the genesis of a trauma-induced somatic mask in a house where cheerfulness was outlawed.
We analyze the terrifying, counterintuitive threat posed by the frequency of good people and the paralyzing prediction errors it triggered.
We looked at the decades-long, hyper-efficient chopstick training, the tongue exercises, the acupressure, the meticulous preparation for an Italian date that existed only in theory.
We broke down the systemic deadlock of the skyscraper tightrope, where the desire to move forward incinerates against the terror of making a mistake.
And finally, we saw how a 1 millimeter physical shift birthed a mellow digital avatar, allowing a profoundly isolated mind to finally communicate its reality.
And the author's meticulous documentation of their isolation provides a mirror that reflects far beyond just the specific phenomenon of the Hikikomori.
How so?
Well, we tend to view this level of social withdrawal as a bizarre, isolated pathology. But if we extract the underlying mechanics, the overwhelming cognitive load of the complex flow, the terror of unscripted interactions, the retreat into curated, asynchronous communication.
We can identify a creeping parallel in broader modern society.
Yes, the text forces us to consider a much larger, more pervasive systemic shift.
It's true. The technological and social infrastructure we interact with daily is increasingly optimizing for exactly what this author required: asynchronous communication, the removal of the unpredictable friction of good people, and the replacement of physical community with digital avatars.
We are all, in various ways, retreating from the unscripted chaos of the physical tightrope into highly controlled, curated digital rooms.
The author was forced into isolation by severe trauma and a glitching nervous system. But it raises a deeply unsettling question regarding the trajectory of our own baseline behaviors.
Are the frictionless, algorithmically controlled environments we increasingly inhabit slowly dismantling our own capacity to handle the complex flow of physical human interaction?
Are we, by optimizing away the friction of society, inadvertently training ourselves to become a civilization of functional shut-ins?
Holding our own digital chopsticks, terrified of the day we actually have to step back onto the tightrope.
Is the vital framework for analyzing our own social endurance. And to you, the listener, we leave you to consider the strength required to maintain a 1 millimeter smile in the dark.
The author spent decades preparing for a 0.001% chance at a better life, treating that tiny sliver of hope as an absolute certainty worth bleeding for. It raises an important question for you. What is the 0.0001% dream in your own life that you've convinced yourself isn't worth preparing for?
And what would happen if, starting today, you decided to raise the corners of your mouth by just 1 millimeter and prepare for it anyway? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.